We're in the intro. Stand by for countdown. Thirty away. $20. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Good morning, Commissioners, and welcome to the Wednesday, December 1st, 2021 Board of Sedgwick County Commission meeting. I'm McKee Mashford, Communications Director. Starting today, Commissioners, the Sedgwick County Community Vaccine Clinic at 223 South Main, is transitioning to walk-in only for COVID-19 vaccines. Appointments are no longer necessary. We're asking the community to continue to provide its input on the Sedgwick County redistricting process by going to the Sedgwick County Commissioner's webpage. There you will find BOCC special projects here, and then you're able to click on the redistricting public comments to provide your comments. The Sedgwick County Treasurer's Office is hosting the East versus West Food Drive Showdown. You're asked to bring non-perishable food donations to your favorite tag office location now through December 10th. Wish list items can also be found on the Catholic Charities website as well as the Kansas Food Banks website. Commissioners, taking a look at today's agenda, you have two appointment items. The first is to accept the resignation of Maggie Ballard from the District 4 Citizens Advisory Board. The second is to reappoint Dr. Scott Kipper as Deputy District Coroner as recommended by Dr. Timothy GORRILL, the Sedgwick County District Coroner. Next, Commissioners, under new business, there is a consideration of the establishment of the ICT 21 Redevelopment District and use of tax increment financing by the City of Wichita. The next item under new business is a resolution amending the schedule of fines within Chapter 8 of the Sedgwick County Code. A resolution modifying the violation classification for discharge of firearms across property boundaries. And last but not least, we are going to have the adoption of the 2022 Sedgwick County Legislative Platform. With that, Chairman, I'll turn the meeting over to you, sir.
Excuse me. Thank you, Hakeem. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, December 1st, Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners meeting. We've got a nice audience here. I'd like to recognize Council Member Brian Fry from the Wichita City Council here. It was a joy to serve with him when you were over there, and welcome to our meeting. And I don't see, I mean, everybody's distinguished, but we'll go over there. Okay, with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk.
Invocation to be observed by a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Lopez?
Present.
Commissioner Dennis?
Present.
Commissioner Howell?
Present.
Commissioner Cruz?
Present.
Chairman Meitzner.
Present. Next item, please.
Public agenda.
Commissioners, you received a couple of emails from our process where we submit public comment by email the days before. Does anybody have any comments and about those? Being none, I'll make a motion that we receive and file the public comments we received by email.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. No other comments. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez? Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz, Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. And Commissioners, we have two people that would like to address us in the public comment, but out of courtesy, do you want to address us right now in the public comment section or during the item that you want to speak about? You can do it as an agenda item or you can address us right now. Okay, thank you. We will postpone that till the agenda item. Okay, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consideration of minutes. Item A, regular meeting minutes of November 3rd, 2021.
Commissioners, as we've done in the past, I'd like to combine items A and B, and if it's okay with you, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the November 3rd and the November 10th County Commission meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other comments or corrections? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz. Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Thank you. Next item, please.
Appointments. Item C, accept the resignation of Maggie Ballard from the District 4 Citizens Advisory Board.
Mr. Papoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Papoon, County Councilor. Item C is to accept the resignation of Maggie Ballard from Commissioner Cruz's Citizen Advisory Board. Upon her recent election to the City Council, I think she believes she can no longer serve effectively on that board. We ask you to accept the resignation, please.
Okay. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Maggie for her contribution to this board. She has been a valuable voice. I want to congratulate her on her being now a City Council member-elect, and so I will make a motion to accept the resignation.
Okay, I'll second that. Any other comments? There's a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Next item, please.
Item D, resolution reappointing Dr. Scott W. Kipper, M.D., as the Deputy District Coroner.
Mr. Papoon.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mike Papoon, County Councilor. The resolution before you reappoints Dr. Kipper as a Deputy District Coroner upon the recommendation of our District Coroner. Item L in their backup, just to give you a heads up, is the contract we have also with Mr. Kipper as Deputy County Coroner. The resolution's in proper form and ask that you adopt the resolution.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Papoon? I don't see any, so I'll make a motion that we reappoint Dr. Scott Kipper to the position as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. No other comments. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business. Item E, consideration of the establishment of the ICT 21 redevelopment district and use of tax increment financing by the City of Wichita.
Okay. Good morning, Brent. Welcome to the meeting.
Good morning, Chairman Meitzner, members of the Board of County Commissioners. For the record, I'm Brent Shelton, your Deputy CFO. The item before you is your consideration of the ICT redevelopment district and the authorization of the use of tax increment financing within that redevelopment site. The City of Wichita held a public hearing on November 2nd, 2021, and they voted unanimously to approve the creation of this district. The city's adoption of this ordinance begins a 30-day period within which, by statutory authorization, the County Commission may consider the county's participation in the tax increment financing. You have three options before you this morning. One is that you may vote to approve the tax increment financing district. You may vote to veto the TIF district. And at the conclusion of this item, you have the option to take no action, which would be a de facto approval of that TIF district. Let us take just a few minutes at the beginning and talk about what tax increment financing is and what tax increment financing is not. It's basically an economic development incentive that allows cities to make infrastructure or other necessary improvements to a real estate site and to pay for them by capturing increased property taxes that result from new development within the area. So at the inception of a TIF district, those participating tax authorities, city, county, school district, their tax base is frozen for the life of that TIF district, and tax revenues that are being received today remain generally flat through the life of the TIF district. Infrastructure is made, different things, whether that be roads, sewers, environmental remediation, but different improvements are made. That spurs development, creates incremental or additional revenues that they're then used to repay that infrastructure investment. Once that's repaid, there's a new tax base generated, and all of the participating governments then realize that appreciated growth and that appreciated tax revenue. Now, in and of itself, a TIF district doesn't increase taxes. It's only a result of that new development or that new construction that we capture that incremental tax that is then used to repay that infrastructure. If nothing occurred, taxes don't go up. The area within which this infrastructure investment is made using TIF funds is typically an area with some sort of an inherent impediment that hinders feasible development. It may be a lack of infrastructure. It may be contamination. There may be something there that hinders that being able to be handled by the public or the private sector alone. And within the TIF statutes, there are about 20 different factors that can be considered in determining TIF eligibility of a site. It talks about a blighted area or a conservation area. And there are 20 different things that can comprise one or two of those, either of those two areas. In the case of the TIF district that you're considering today, that eligibility is outside of that. It's as a result of this property has been identified as an enterprise zone prior to 1992. That's specifically set forth in statute as making it TIF eligible. If we look specifically at the TIF district that's being proposed today, the developer RRM Properties, LLC, is proposing to invest approximately $100 million in the investment of in the development of the former El Paso refinery site. The proposed district is approximately 115 acres. The boundaries of the area, it's typically, or I guess you think of 21st Street and I-135 as the area that this district is in. It's bounded on the east by Interstate I-135. Chisholm Creek and the Union Pacific Rail Line are on the west. And if 25th Street North continued across, that would be about the northern boundary of this proposed district. The level of contamination on the site, since it was a former refinery, requires the developer to make some additional mitigation efforts. There are currently wells and monitors on the site that will have to be relocated. Those will have to be maintained. And the developer's proposing to do that, as well as construct about 1 million square feet of new warehousing, manufacturing, and transit facilities over the next 10 years. The City Council Agendas report indicated that this project will include commercial and industrial uses, including advanced manufacturing and warehousing. And the central location adjacent to I-135 will provide new opportunities for job creation in warehousing, logistics, e-commerce, manufacturing, and other growing employment segments. The TIF expenditures within the anticipated area of the project plan are about $6.8 million. About $5 million of that will be supported through debt financing, and the other 1.8 will be pay-as-you-go financing to pay for those infrastructure improvements as the TIF revenues are generated. Should there be sufficient revenues, widening of 21st Street and some signaling and improvements along that may also be considered as a utilization of those TIF funds. When we look at a TIF and the county does what is our opportunity by statute to look at whether or not the creation of the TIF district would cause adverse effect to the county. We developed a policy in 2008 that gave us 5 criteria within which we would identify or analyze whether or not this TIF or any TIF would cause adverse effect. So if we look at each one of these 5 individually, our analysis for the first one deals with the loss of tax revenue and how that might affect the future delivery of public services. Now, currently, this area generates a little over $6,000 in county property tax revenues. As stated earlier, we're going to continue to receive approximately that amount because the tax base would be frozen. The construction activity, the activities that will be occurring on the site, I don't see them increasing the need significantly for public safety, public works, or public health services that the county would be provided. This is within the city limits of Wichita. And at the end of the project, should projections be met, we're looking at a tax revenues to the county that could approximate $800,000. So I see a de minimis effect on county services, and we're continuing to receive those tax revenues as we go through it. So I don't see an adverse effect created from number 1. Could this project be done without TIF? This is the crucial but-for argument that we always look at. Without TIF support, market analysis of sales prices of the properties in the area, because of the contamination, would provide the developer with a return on their investment of negative 5%. It doesn't seem to be feasible without some sort of public support. With the TIF support, those same projections of prices and returns would generate about a 9% return for the developer, which seems to be reasonable given the size of the investment as well as the risk involved with a project like this. The other thing that I would just note anecdotally is that in 2004, the refinery was closed. In 2005, the site was cleared. If this was developable by the private sector alone, something probably would have happened over the last 16 years, but we haven't seen that type of activity. So I would say that but for the TIF, the development would not occur. Do we have a developer that is committed and capable of pulling off the project that's being proposed? Remember, this is about a $100 million project. $6.8 million in tax increment financing. So less than 7% of the total project is supported by tax increment financing. In addition to that, the developer is guaranteeing that there won't be a TIF shortfall. So we have the developer committed to this $100 million project and then guaranteeing the public support through the tax increment financing. So I would think that we do have a developer that's committed, that does have enough skin in the game to see the project through to fruition. The fourth thing we look at is whether or not costs to the county government are greater than the benefits to the county government. Now, we could continue for the next 10 to 20 years, like we have for the last 16 years, and have a vacant piece of real estate with flat taxes and no activity. With the TIF support and the proposed project, we're looking at the 10-year mark, if that would be sufficient to repay the debt and close the TIF, probably $500,000 in revenues to the county at that point in time. In addition to that, with most TIFs, we solely look at what happens to the tax base as a result of the development. With this one, we also have the potential that we really can't quantify today of job creation. If we have warehousing and logistics and e-commerce and different types of commercial and industrial uses going on in the area, That has the potential to create jobs, and we know that the benefits of job creation across the county. And 5, we were provided with sufficient data, notification, and cooperation from the city as we went through doing our analysis. They didn't withhold information. Things were provided immediately following that November 2nd, 2021 hearing and vote. So I would recommend that because the 5 policy requirements for the county approval have been met, we have a site that, despite its location, has been vacant for over 15 years, and that the potential for the additional economic benefits of job creation that aren't typically considered with a tax increment financing district, I would recommend that the commission approve the ICT 21 redevelopment district and the use of tax increment financing. At this point, I will answer questions. I will relinquish control back to the chairman. We may have some folks that wish to speak to the item as well.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. There's a question from Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions. You did say that there would be some spending up front, and then later on there would be some pay-as-you-go. Can you share those numbers once again, please?
$5 million is the approximate amount of the debt financing, and 1.8 would be the pay-as-you-go financing.
So who's doing the financing on that? That's city, or is that the county, or
City of Wichita will
city
issue
financing.
TIF bonds, yes.
When you talk about the 7%, number, is that just county only, or is that county, city, school? The $6.8 million of TIF funding, is that for all 3?
Right, that's the combined public investment of $6.8 million as a percentage of the $100 million project.
So what percentage of that would be county? Do we know? Or how many dollars would be county?
Yeah, typically we're going to be about 25% of the increment, so $2.25 million, something in that range.
All right, very good. And do we know, I tried to hear a list of things that are anticipated to be, the TIF money would be used to create or to enhance or improve. Can we have that list again? Is it streets and drainage? What kind of things are we talking about?
Streets, sewer improvements, some of the contamination remediation efforts, potentially 21st Street, improvements to that between Broadway and I-135.
Is there anything on the private property? In other words, these are streets that service these areas, but these streets are considered public streets at that point. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So city and or county could potentially put tax dollars towards those types of improvements regardless of this TIF, if that's what we wanted to do. In other words, we have the option of using other revenues to do this if we wanted to do that. It's something we could do, but in this case, the proposal is to use future property tax dollars to pay for these improvements. Okay.
Right. It would be similar to levying special assessments in the area. The property owners would pay for those improvements.
Now, since this is tax revenues above the base, the state, their 1.5 mil assessment, that would be on. Does their base also stay static, or does their base grow with increased assessed value? Do we know?
The 1.5 mils that's levied on behalf of the state is levied on the total tax base throughout the life of the TIF. So they're not frozen.
Okay.
They're on the total amount.
So they do see an increase over the life of the TIF, unlike
Correct.
the city, school, and
Right.
county. And then for clarity, they will pay whatever property taxes are whatever the calculation is for their tax liability. They're still assessed those taxes. They have to pay those taxes. It's just that the city and county essentially are making a front-end decision to direct those revenues towards these improvements. By giving up our future tax revenue, we're allowing that money to flow towards those improvements.
That is correct.
And the schools typically don't vote on this, but they could if they wanted to. I guess they just generally let this be approved by not speaking to it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions for now. I may have some more later, but thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions at this time for Brent? from the commission? I don't see any. So thank you, Brent, for the presentation. So we'll go to the public comment. First to comment is Dale Goder. Welcome to the commission meeting. You state your name and address, and we try to keep the comments to about 5 minutes or less if we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dale Goter, 2625 West Cornelison. I'm in LACEY CRUSE's district. I want to thank her for helping to facilitate this discussion today. I had two reasons to come here. One was to pay my taxes, which I did this morning, $2,700. So I expect my money's worth today, and I'm probably a little bitter about some things. I'm happy to pay my taxes. There's some folks who will speak later aren't quite so happy, but I think local government's a great value, and the work you do is essential. And I'm here today to I hope to help facilitate the process. Up front, I want to say I have no opinion on this IC21 project. It looks really good on its face. It's not like I'm not here to criticize that. What I'm here to do is to raise a question about the process. Mr. Shelton went through the various criteria identified with TIFs, and in poking around largely in connection with the recent Riverside housing development project, which you signed off on, which is a really bad thing, I found this Sedgwick County, City of Wichita Economic Development Guidelines. They were adopted in 2020. And I've had a discussion about this with Mark Elder with the city throughout the course of this. And the one that stands out is in item 6, where it says, tax increment financing will only be used as a final effort for funding. Developer must prove all other financing efforts have been exhausted. That's fairly clear cut. It's not ambiguous at all. And what seemed to be missing in the discussion, particularly in the Riverside project, was that evidence that the developer proved that all other financing options were exhausted. This is your policy. It's a good one, because the reason it's there is you don't want to just give tax money away to folks who come and ask for it without them demonstrating a need. Mr. Shelton pointed out how TIF funds are very targeted. There have to be very specific criteria. So the point I'm just trying to make is that we wish in this process you would ask for that evidence as a part of this process. It's your policy. The developer must prove that's the case. I know Mr. Cornell is a very upstanding developer, and I don't think he'd have any trouble given the description of this project and the environmental challenges of all that probably coming forward and saying nobody's going to lend us this money to do this and recover it, that the TIF is very appropriate. Different for the Riverside project. 40 homes built in a prime residential neighborhood in a housing market that's exploding. Makes little sense that $700,000 of an $8 million project couldn't have been financed. That would mean that the developer would have went to somebody like Gary Schmidt and said, would you give me that last $700,000 on that $8 million? And he'd say no. It's kind of hard to picture that. But the point of this all is that in the process, as you go through this, I hope that in this one you'll exercise that necessity to say, have you proven you can't get this money anyplace else? The TIF is absolutely essential to make this work. Mr. Shelton laid that out fairly clearly. I thought he did a great job of saying that this is a unique, environmentally challenged area, and it's easy to understand how that might be applied. You might get a different perspective from the folks who will follow me, but from my perspective, that seems to be different. Nonetheless, it's about the process. Is there proof, as is in your guidelines, that financing is not available? And just quickly to follow that up, I filed an open records request with the city and asked for the documentation that showed in that Riverside project that the financing options had been exhausted. Mark Elder did a fine job of trying to answer the question. He sent me 5 documents that had nothing to do with that question. So I filed a complaint with the district attorney and said this was not an answer. Ann Schlegel took that to the city law department and got a response that is, to me, nonsensical, because the city attorney said, first, there is no such documentation. Says that just clearly. There is no documentation of that proof being provided. Then later in the same letter, she says, yes, there is documentation of it. So I don't know. It's next stop will be the Attorney General to ask them to say, really, is there not an answer to my open records request? It's fairly clear cut. And she says, I got 30 seconds, and that's about, pretty much sums it up. I do hope in the end it's about accountability. Giving tax money away is a really sacred obligation. You have a tough job doing that, but I'd encourage you to follow your own guidelines. It says it fairly clearly. Prove that the financing had been, options had been exhausted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from Mr. Goder? I don't see any. Thank you, Dale. Next up is Celeste Reset. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Good morning.
Good morning. That was close enough. It's Reset. And I want to begin addressing you all and thanking you, Chairman Meitzner, for working with Mayor Whipple on opening up the former Brutalist award-winning public library for vaccinations. I thought that was a good cooperative step of both the county and the city. So thank you for your leadership there. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Your economic development guidelines, as Dale Goder referred to, are pretty clear-cut about tax increment financing. I've got a copy of them with me today. And I don't understand why both the city and the county are not following them. Why even there are guidelines or policies or charter ordinances or administrative regulations if we're not going to follow them. Your guidelines say, in the general guidelines, that TIFs should only be used if the project would not occur otherwise. The language specifically says that the project would not occur as proposed but for the assistance provided through the TIF. TIFs are a last resort, something that should only be used in a project that has no other way of going forward. Okay, so I interpret this to mean a developer should have tried bank financing or special assessments, alluding to County Commissioner Howell, your statements and your questions, before coming to the City Council for approval for the TIF. I really think, having been a banker for 25 years, that banks are in a better position to be lenders and oversee construction project costs, like the $7 million that's being asked for today. Banks can do all types of construction project loans, and they can participate in those loans with other banks working together to exceed their legal lending limit. They can easily handle a $7 million loan, and the county shouldn't be put on the hook, or taxpayers, for future tax increment financing to fund the remaining $7 million of this loan, this TIF district. Incentive objectives in the same policy say that the major objectives of TIFs is to encourage redevelopment of underutilized commercial and industrial areas. And I don't really have a problem with this TIF district forming itself, because I really do think it does meet the definition of an enterprise zone. So thank you for those of you that brought that up as being a criteria in the policy. But there have been, as Dale Goder alluded to, TIFs that have been created that you've signed off on and the city has approved, like the Riverside TIF, which was merely an area that a Kansas City developer called Blighted, and in the YouTube video with a former, she will soon be a former city council rep, said, had a sticker patch. So a sticker patch should not be the qualifications for a TIF district. But I'll get back to the current TIF district on hand. So project requirements state right at the top in the first bullet, developer must prove all of their financing efforts have been exhausted. And as Dale Goder pointed out, when we file CORAs, we sometimes have a hard time getting straight answers. So what I would like to ask you today is, what did you get from these developers that showed you they were turned down for this $7 million loan, which is a mere 10% of the $100 million project, saying they couldn't get the financing from local banks and they couldn't get financing from participated loans with a group of local banks. The concern I have with TIF districts is I'm an accountant, and I've noticed that our TIF districts, on the whole now, are starting to lose money to taxpayers. I'm concerned about the Douglas and Hillside TIF, which we sold land for to pay off the debt, and the Delano Catalyst site. I'm concerned about some of the other TIFs, like the recent TIF that's covering the new ball stadium, which is also losing money. So I would caution you as a taxpayer and a Wichita native and a banker and someone who loves numbers, you need to approach TIFs you're creating with caution, because I'm concerned about the ones we already have. So on that note, I will just end by saying, make sure they've provided the documentation showing they couldn't get the financing from a consortium of banks with some type of lending project for that $7 million. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any questions for Celeste? I don't see any. Thank you for
Thank you.
addressing us. Okay, that's the only ones that signed up. Does anybody else want to address this, address us? And I don't see any. So we will close the public comment on this and bring it back to the bench. Brent, can you come up for just a second? I have a quick question. So I think we're all familiar with this property. We've all driven by it for years. So this has been closed since 2004?
That is
Correct?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
It's been a vacant lot since 2005.
And I know that the Mr. Corneo and they have had ownership of this and helped clean up and put up barriers and everything else for a number of years. And I know that they probably, I have a lot of respect for our being on the GWP board. I have a lot of respect for our local banking community because we have the good news is we have locally owned banks that are very interested in developing our community. So we don't have to go to the Bank of New York and have them run spreadsheets on any potential thing. So now the bad news is that the banks know exquisitely exactly what's going on locally. And so my assumption is that this property has been vacant for 17 years, and every bank's probably had a chance to be a part of some kind of a participation, and it hasn't happened. I'm just commenting that. So with that, I believe it's that this thing is appropriate use, and I'm sorry for whatever the dismay was about the Riverside thing, but I try to look at each item on the merits of its own item. So, Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. I think there's a couple of things that I'd like to just address. The process for TIFs clearly needs to be defined a little bit better. When it comes to those guidelines, is that I have to agree with some of the comments made from our speakers around, are we following guidelines in all of these projects? And so I'd like to handle the discussion of TIFs in general after we discuss the item at hand. So if we can table that and have a staff meeting where we talk about it. I think the other options are, if we don't even have to do anything with this, the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about it in this setting today was to address the fact that there is questions around TIFs. So I think that that's important that we address. So can we talk about that? Do we need to reevaluate how these are? The guideline sheet, is that a resolution that we have to follow? We're required to follow that? Is the guideline a requirement, is my first question.
Well, Commissioner, to address that, we have 3 different documents that under which our process for analyzing the tax increment financing districts occurs. One is the state statutes. Within the confines of the state statutes, which give counties and school districts the right to determine whether or not a TIF district would cause adverse effect, we developed a policy with 5 criteria. So that's county policy that, should we choose to hear this, we would analyze it based on that policy. The TIF guidelines that were established in 2020 between the City of Wichita and us are guidelines for how to kind of lay out the process. The $10,000 upfront fee that the developer pays, the application fee that they pay, and the steps that must be taken, that they walk through in terms of developer guarantees and so forth. I think out of that 60-some page document, there are 8 pages of guidelines about TIF process. Our role doesn't really occur until after the City Council has approved the TIF district, and then we've got that 30-day window to see if there's adverse effect. So our scope is kind of limited to that point. In terms of the final effort, discussion, and we'll have, I think, be happy to have it in a workshop format or whatever. But we look at this in terms of the project, not necessarily the developer. A project that doesn't stand on its own, that needs some sort of support, is the way we interpret that final effort. This project wouldn't be funded by the private sector. Now, we might have a developer that on their own financial strength could get that financing. But the bank looks at the deal and says, this is a loser unless you get some other support. And so we focus the final effort on the project, not the developer, because the next item we look at, do we have a capable, competent developer that's committed to seeing it through? So if the developer couldn't get the money any other way, that probably raises a red flag for number 3.
Okay, thank you for that that explanation, and I'd like to talk about putting that for a workshop later, maybe next year, so that we can get all of this worked out, whether the guidelines are actual policy, whether, I mean, the 30-day window that we have to take this up, if we don't take it up. I mean, it seems like there's just some questions around making this a more easily understood, transparent process. And I think it's been pretty transparent so far with this one. And but I just want to make sure that we have questions from constituents that are here and in the county, get those answered. So now to the project at hand. You know, I think for me, when I make decisions, I think about the longevity of the decision that I'm going to make. And when I came to Wichita in 2006, this site was shut down. It's been shut down ever since. You know, I've lived up north. I'm a North Sider now. I've lived up there since 2009. I've driven past this site hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I've always had, like, what is someone going to do with it? And so when I was briefed on the potential plans for this, it was pretty exciting to see something that was taken that's pretty much an eyesore as the gateway from the north side to our city. It's been pretty sad looking. So it is very exciting to see something happening with this. The environmental cleanup that's going to happen, that could be incredibly costly once we get in. The prices that we have now could potentially rise, right, with all of the construction costs. So these numbers are just simply estimates. I think the other potential for this is once this property is developed, could it spur more development that will go from 135 all the way to Broadway? I drive Broadway up to 29th Street every single day to drop my daughter off at school. I drive it 4 times a day. And so I'd love to see something happen with that. You know, the old dog food plant, you know, fixed up and other developments up there. That's I think an incredible opportunity, especially being right next to Nomar and all that's going on with Evergreen and that whole area being redeveloped up there. So I think it's important for us to understand the potential of this whole entire thing, from job creation to just eliminating an eyesore. And so with that, Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution consenting to the establishment of the ICT 21 redevelopment district.
Okay. I'll second that. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of questions and some comments. So just to clarify once again, what is the county's fiscal cost on the front end? Do we have any fiscal cost other than future lost property tax revenue?
The county will not contribute any, there's no front-end cost to the county. Yeah.
All right. So again, the city did their work on this. The date in the PowerPoint, I think, said December 2nd, which is tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Didn't they do this last month? Was it November?
Yeah, November 2nd.
November 2nd. Okay, that's what I thought. So schools apparently aren't going to take this up as usual, and the city's already taken care of this, and it was a 7-0 in the city, and they're the ones that have the front end debt obligation. They're covering the debt. Okay. Do we know for sure what's going to be? I counted what looks like 14 buildings on the plan. Is that about right, roughly?
I think that
Number of
sounds
buildings.
about right.
You said over 1 million square feet. So anyway, it looks like 14 buildings on the site plan I'm looking at there. Do we know for sure what's going to go into these buildings? We don't right now, I assume.
I don't think we do at this point. I mean,
They're available for future
Right.
deals that they'll make with other businesses and things like that. So we don't really know the number of jobs necessarily. We don't know exactly what businesses will go in there. There could be lots of different things. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So that's, it's a little hard if you're the developer to know exactly what your profit opportunities will be because you don't have all the information that you need on the front end. You by faith, you kind of invest in this hoping that it'll work out in your favor, but you don't really know that at this point. It depends on what deals they can make going forward. So I think there is a lot of risk on the developer's part on this. Let me just talk about my own history here a little bit. When I first ran for this office, there were some commissioners that were always a no, and there were some commissioners that were always a yes on every TIF. And I didn't like either one of those positions. I think the TIFs need to be understood. It is a state-created economic development tool, and there are some guidelines on when you should use it and when you should not use it. And I think they have, at the state level, some of the language in the state law, I think it does need to be reformed, but the state has not been willing to take that up. But, and I think to Ms. Raysette's point, there have been some TIFs that have, I think, taken advantage of this that have turned out to be bad for the taxpayers. And I think there have been times where maybe a TIF should not have been approved that ultimately was approved. I'll reflect on the Riverside discussion we had. There was not a lot of people in here talking about that at the time. They may have had a better debate across the street, but we didn't have much of a debate over here. And so, to me, when I have to trust the people that are presenting things to me, unless there's someone that cross-checks that with cross-checks the information and says it's not true, or there's another perspective, then I really only know what I've been told by you, Mr. Shelton. So, much like this TIF, that one was the city led on that one and came to us very mature, and we didn't have any front-end obligations on that one either. So what we're actually being asked to do today is whether or not we want to be willing to give up our future tax revenue above the base for 20 years that will go to streets and sewer line, I assume storm sewers, things like that, infrastructure around this site. That again, it's not on personal property. It's something the government will continue to own. It's owned by taxpayers. But what it does is it allows this development to go forward. And I do believe the but-for in this case is real. And by the way, going back to before I was elected, since then, I think we have tapped the brakes on TIFs. We have not seen nearly as many TIFs as we used to see. And I think we've been more judicious and more thoughtful about which ones we approve. And by the way, I've not voted for every TIF. There have been some TIFs that were discussed, and as we dug into it, they went away because they realized there wasn't going to be support or whatever. But there have been some TIFs that I have not supported because I don't think they made sense. And so this one, it sounds to me like if that negative 5% number is real, then why would anybody do this if they thought they were going to lose 5%? I joke about this a little bit just to make a point, but I always ask people, what does Spirit Aerosystems make? And everybody always says airplanes. And I have to answer and they say, well, no, they actually use airplanes to make money. Their actual job is to make money. And they use that industry to make money. And the reality is every business out there has the same goal. It is essentially to be successful and to make money. If you knew you were going to lose 5% on this, why would you ever do it? So again, I don't know if that number is real, but I assume it's real. And your point is that the banks would not loan money on something that's going to be a loser. Why would they do that? And someone said, well, there's no other options. I heard someone say, I think across the street, that some of the developers in this situation probably have the money. Maybe they have money in the bank. That's not really my business, but let's assume that you're talking about people with billions of dollars in the bank. Why would they take their money and put it towards something that essentially has no return on the investment? Again, their job is to make money. So having money is not the critical part here. Is whether or not the project on its own actually is likely to be successful or not. That's the key. Mm-hmm. And smart business people, that's really what they have to look at. Someone said there's no other way of going forward. Well, I'm not sure. Again, you could go forward and lose money. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the point here. TIF should only be used if there's, if there's no other way it will happen without the TIF. Again, it comes back to the but for, and that's the most important part of the discussion today. Someone said we're giving away tax money, or giving away tax dollars. I don't know that I agree with that either. I mean, again, this is city infrastructure. And the one thing that's different about this as a TIF is that the school revenue that normally goes towards education is going to be used for city infrastructure. Otherwise, city and county infrastructure, we partner with them all on all kinds of projects. So the infrastructure that the city and county thinks is important, we do that. Now, it wasn't too long ago, we put a road in for an ethanol plant. That wasn't a TIF, but we chose to use taxpayer money to improve a road so we can have an ethanol plant here in Sedgwick County. That's a good example of using taxpayer money to make a project go forward. And, we talked about the Tyson chicken plant. Had that gone forward, we would have had to build roads out there too, and on it goes. And so using taxpayer money to improve infrastructure so a project can be successful, based on what's needed to happen in that area is not unusual. So finally, let me see here. Anything else I wanted to say here? I don't always support TIFs. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on the situation. I think that we have to be thoughtful. But this one looks to me like this one meets all the criteria. There truly is a blight. It's not been developing on its own. I think the but-for is real. And again, I think this benefits taxpayers in the long run. I think there's other tax revenues from income taxes and from construction costs and other things that we not even begin to calculate here. So at the end of the day, I think this is one that actually does make sense to me. But I'll stop talking. If there's a motion, I'll probably support it today. Thank you.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. My briefest of comments is that my last year at the city council, under the direction of an assignment by Andrew Nave and Greater Wichita Partnership, and Brent, you were there, and Brian Fry was there, but we looked at all of the incentive programs that are available in the city of Wichita and the county and the state. And we tried to come up with a more streamlined and a condensed and a way less confusing economic development when somebody calls and asks what's available. And that was almost a year-long effort. We had an outside agency come in and tell us what was going on around the country. And I thought we came up with a simplified, a much better document. Seeing heads nodding and yes of those that remembered. And I think that even carried over. Then I came to the county, and I think we actually proved it all my first year at the county. But that said, during the course of my experience at the city under these TIFs, based on experience and whatever, we even, at the city, we implemented a policy where if the developer was so confident that this TIF was going to work, or the CIDs or whatever other, that if there's ever any shortfall, they would personally pay for that shortfall, which you addressed earlier. Right. And I am aware that there's at least one TIF today, or before I left, where the developers have had to write a check at the end of the year, and there might even be more. And so this one also has that implemented, as painful as it could be, Mr. Cornell. Let's assume that you're going to be successful, but that was a good step. So I would agree that we could have a workshop where we could review all of the policies, have Mr. Nave come in and summarize that for us all. I think you did originally, and we could see if there's some more recommendations of improvements, and or maybe even each of the commissioners could try to meet ahead of time to see if our answers are especially Commissioner Lopez is new. She's probably got all of us, our heads spin the first time we get in the economic development war chest. It gets a little crazy. So anyway, that said, I'm for that review in the near future. So I don't see any other comments. So there's a motion and a second to approve item E. So Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez?
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz?
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Brent. We'll take just a few seconds if there's anybody wanting to depart or the commotion of departing. And Mr. Corneo, best of luck with the project. Thank you for being interested in the local economy. Okay, just another few seconds, Madam Clerk, please. Just wait a minute. And thank you all for being here. Okay, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item F, a resolution amending the schedule of fees within Chapter 8 of the Sedgwick County Code.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kirk Sponsel, Assistant County Counselor. What you have before you today is a resolution that would amend a portion of our county code. Pursuant to Kansas statute, Sedgwick County has the authority to enforce its own code and resolutions. Sedgwick County established the county court as a potential mechanism for hearing and ruling on alleged violations of our code and resolutions. Pursuant to statute, the Board of County Commissioners actually has the authority to impose fines of up to $1,000 for violations of its code and resolutions. However, another statute requires that we establish a schedule of fines that shall be imposed for violations of our county codes and resolutions. Sedgwick County Code, Section 8-5, is our schedule of fines, and the section details classifications of violations and their penalties. Currently, the schedule of fines only goes up to a Class I violation, which carries with it a potential penalty of up to $500. This resolution would create a new class of violations, Class J, which carries with it a potential fine of up to $1,000. The proposed action before you today is not required, but could be used to match the extent of powers granted by statute. You certainly have the ability to approve the resolution, deny the resolution, or take other action as preferred by the board. And with that, I stand for questions.
Okay, and Kirk, is it this item creating this new class? Is it? I assume it's. Well, I don't think it's a secret. It's related to the next item G. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner Chairman. This would potentially impact us looking at and potentially cleaning up a few other aspects of our code, but those items are more on the periphery, and if needed, we could certainly readdress the issue if needed later in the future. This is in direct response to item G.
Okay. That said, I know we got some questions. I know that we approved on November 3rd the next item, and here it is less than 30 days later, and I've confirmed that there's, thanks to the November 3rd action and thanks to efforts by the sheriff and Commissioner Howe and neighborhood meetings, and I confirmed yesterday that there's not been any incidences and everybody's kind of cooperating, going along on that item. So it's awful early, in my opinion. I see Commissioner Howe's got his light on, but I'm going to make a motion that we defer item F and G for more data for 6 months, and that way we can get data, and then you, Kirk, and your group can come back anytime there and say, hey, we do have some other items that we need to clarify for a new class of J, a new fine deal. But I'll make that motion here after Commissioner Howe. Okay, well, I'll make it right now that we defer for items F and G for 6 months. But Commissioner Howe.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this actually is not part of the same issue that we're going to take up next. This simply allows the county to exercise its full authority under statute. The Kansas statutes allow counties to assess fines up to $1,000, and each of our violations is connected to a violation class letter, A through I, and we would add J, and so we would connect each violation to some type of penalty. The state allows us to go up to $1,000 if we want to exercise our statutory authority up to $1,000. This is necessary to create the option for a Class J violation. And if someone is convicted of a violation Class J, they would have, the county judge would have the discretion to levy a fine between half that amount up to the full amount. And so they would have some discretion to, again, right now, if we pass this, there's nothing in county statutes that would be a Class J. It just simply creates that opportunity for future discussions on any violation we might want to consider. So this just, again, this item by itself does nothing other than it recognizes the state's authority given to the county's authority given to us by the state of Kansas. So there is no reason to delay item F. To me, that makes no sense whatsoever. If you want to delay the issue of shooting across property lines, that's another discussion, and I'll talk about that next. But I really don't think we ought to delay accepting, if you will, opportunities that the state has given us as a county. By the way, Johnson County has done this already. In fact, their issue of shooting across property lines is in fact a $1,000 fine. And the biggest criticism we got on that issue was it wasn't enough money. It was only $500. And I said during that time, I would work with legal and work with folks to create an opportunity for us to go up to $1,000. So I'm just simply following through with what I said. That discussion started a month ago when we passed this. In fact, actually 2 weeks before that. So this is now 6 weeks I've been talking about the $1,000 fine. And there's no reason that I can see of to at least go the first step here, create the class level J, so that we could even have the next discussion about whether that should be a $1,000 fine or a $500 fine. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to make a substitute motion. I'm going to vote no against your motion, but I would encourage us not to slow down on item F because it has nothing to do with the next item. Thank you.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying now, but I have not been briefed, and I don't think any of us have, about what these potential other infractions would be included in item J. I'm not against creating a class item J. I just need to know from legal, I need to be maybe as an agenda item or as a workshop that what is the purpose, further define that, because it's just kind of, this comes at me enough without seeing that. So, but first I'll, Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. I think I'm probably going right down the path you were just saying. I don't feel like I have enough information to change that policy from 500 to 1,000. I don't know how many times we even issue $500 fines now. I mean, if we don't issue many now, is there a real need to go up to $1,000? I don't know what falls into the categories of these, higher fines. I don't know. I guess I just don't have enough information to feel comfortable changing that. And the reason we're having this conversation right now is because of item G that we're going to discuss, which I'm not comfortable changing this to a $1,000 fine when we just passed that resolution. We haven't had anybody call. The complaints have stopped because there has been a lot of work done with these neighborhoods to ensure that that problem is not happening. And so if we see that problem continuing to happen or start happening again, then I agree we should bring it back up at that point and we should have that conversation then. But we haven't given it any time to see if that's even needed at this point. So I don't want to overreach here and change it from 500 to 1,000 at this time. So I agree with waiting 60 days or however long until,
Yep.
How long did you say, 6 months?
Well, I said 6 months on both of them, but I could amend my motion. But Kirk, how long, between Mike Papoon and you, how long would it take for you to, you need 60 days to kind of give us a real view of what an item J $1,000 fine world would be? Or how long would it take for us to be updated to consider item J?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Papoon, County Councilor, it may make sense to bifurcate the two issues. We'll be happy to come back in about 60 days with along the lines of what Commissioner Howell was talking about, and make a case and brief you fully on the upside and downside of increasing the fine to $1,000 and a little history on our the fines that we've been receiving. So it might make sense to do that and then look at item G in 6 months.
Okay. I will, there's a couple other comments, but I will amend my motion to just defer item F for 60 days so we can get further clarification. I don't know who was first.
Can I speak to that?
Sure. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you. I was second for the original motion, and I will go ahead and second this amended motion. But I guess my concern is, as I read through the backup material, and granted, we were working over the holidays, and as a result, we did things differently at this point because we didn't get briefed on any of these things. So I don't know what items that Mr. Sponsel indicates that we need to add into this because I've never been briefed on them. What I don't understand, and I guess maybe you can clarify, what we're looking at on item F is to add an item J for to move it to $1,000 fine.
The class.
What other items are in item F that we've never been briefed on that I didn't find in our backup unless I missed it? Do you need?
So just for clarification, item F would just extend the schedule of fines itself. It creates that possibility for violations, but in order for you to classify any type of violation under code or resolution as a Class J violation, that would have to be done by a separate action itself.
Okay. But I thought you said that it also clarified other things that were missing.
We are looking at cleaning up language within other portions of our code, but those are not being raised or addressed today.
So they're not part of item F that we're voting on, or clarifying as cleaning up items?
That is correct. Item F, whether approved or denied, would potentially impact our approach on those items, but like I said, we're still in the process of reviewing and analyzing those situations.
I guess I still don't understand. I'm sorry, I must be slow.
Commissioner Dennis, if I could jump in. I think what Kirk is trying to say is, when he was talking about cleaning up, the purpose of raising it to 1,000 is that we could look at other areas in our code which a $1,000 fine might be more appropriate. But he's also saying that none of that will happen until we come back before you with that specific violation and have you approve that as being a $1,000 limit or cap on a fine. I think that was just an aside that he threw in. He wasn't. There's nothing else that this affects right now. We would have to come back with you, whether it's shooting across property or dumping trash or anything. We'll have to come back to you to get that fine increased.
So you're saying that there are other things that we may need a level J to fine people $1,000 for?
That's exactly what
But do we know what those are?
That's why we appreciate 60 days to fully come back with you what those items might be and brief you.
Okay, well, I seconded the amended motion, and I can live with it. I am kind of reticent to increasing fines. That's a tax on the public whenever we start doing that, and unless we know exactly what we're doing, I'm kind of reticent at increasing fines for anything. So you're going to have to convince me in 60 days that that's a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like I'm repeating myself, and I apologize for that, but this does not connect to any actual violation. There's nothing in the law right now that's going to be a level J unless we make a decision on a separate resolution to make it a level J violation. This is simply putting the table out there. It says we have the option of having it a level J violation, a punishment, a $1,000 fine as a punishment for a violation of level J, class J violation. The next item, which we're not talking about right now, but the next item is regarding shooting across property lines, which I think is an old topic at this point. Everyone knows about this. Whether or not that should be a level J violation or not, I think it's a policy choice. But we don't need 60 days to figure that one out. 60 days is needed for you to review the rest of the code, everything else we do, to find out what other things might be more appropriate to be a level J violation, if anything. We're not sure there's anything else out there, but maybe there is, maybe there's not. You need time to review everything else into the county code. That's 60 days is appropriate for that. So I want to talk about the process here for just a minute. I keep getting criticized for doing things like a short circuit here. I'm doing things quickly. Bear in mind, I talked about the $1,000 fine 6 weeks ago when I tried to pass a resolution regarding, and again, $500 fine at that time, about shooting across property lines. I followed the process. It was on the draft agenda. Commissioners had opportunities to be briefed. I hope they were briefed. It was on the final agenda, and then it ended up on the public agenda, the released agenda. We had news interviews everywhere around the county regarding that issue. We delayed the issue for 2 weeks for more time. It ended up not changing a thing, but we delayed it for 2 weeks. Again, I talked about a $1,000 fine at that time. And I worked with council about this issue of $1,000, and it was at the time we decided it was almost a distraction to the issue of shooting across property lines to talk about the $1,000 fine at that time. It was easier to pass a resolution on shooting across property lines at that time without having to be weighted down with resolutions regarding changing fine schedules and everything else. So we moved forward. And thankfully, as Chairman mentioned, we seem to have solved the problem regarding that issue. I'm following through with what I promised I was going to do 6 weeks ago. That's all this is. This first item today simply changes the schedule of fine opportunities. It doesn't connect any issue to a $1,000 fine. That's a separate discussion for every single thing you want to consider in that regard. All this does today, item F, or say agenda item F, I guess it is. Agenda item, am I on the right one here? Yes.
Yes.
Agenda item number F, it simply allows the county to use the full authority that the state has given us. Even if we never connect anything to a $1,000 fine, why would we not at least put that on the books and have that ready to go just in case we ever wanted to use it? Why would we delay putting this in the books and having a $1,000 fine in that table, even if we have nothing, or that's the penalty that's defined in the rest of the county code? Why would we delay this? I don't understand the purpose of a delay on item F. It makes no sense. I'm flabbergasted as to why this conversation continues to be. We don't know what we're doing. We have not been briefed. I'd like to know if commissioners have been briefed on this, because I've been talking about this for quite a long time now. If commissioners have not been briefed, I guess we have a process problem. This should not be delayed because we don't understand what we're doing. I followed the process. This item's, again, 8 days ago, this was on a draft agenda. It was released, I think, last Friday. I'm not sure exactly the date it was released, but we've had some time to know this was coming once again. And the one briefing I did have, the other person in the room didn't stay for lots of questions and answers at that time. My point is this, is that we have opportunities to be briefed. We have opportunities to understand what's coming up on the agenda. To delay things that are important simply because we feel like we haven't had time, I think that goes to us investing more time in our work here. I'm concerned that we're not doing our work. We're not giving our work due diligence and leaning forward to get things done. And everything shouldn't be delayed because we haven't had time. I think we have plenty of time. I'm following the processes. And if I'm not following the processes, please, staff, please tell me I need to do something differently. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. It seems as if this needs to be a little bit more fleshed out, and I'm just wondering how it even got on a draft agenda. That's my first question is, if 4 out of the 5 commissioners have questions around this, maybe that's a process in which we need to reevaluate on how this even got on a draft agenda. So I'd like to maybe just ask that question, and I think it's important for us to understand that we have a lot of things that we need to work on, and our time is limited. And so maybe we don't have to ask. I won't make you answer that question. Thank you for your willingness, though, Mike. So the things that we put on our agenda, at what point do they need to be fleshed out with commissioners before they hit this bench? What's appropriate? I guess that's a question that I'd just like to ask later. I'm not asking you to answer it. That's one let's talk about, because that's important. To evaluate a fine structure for potential fines of anything and everything, how much time will that take? That is a question I'd like to ask. And who will be doing that? I mean, there could be a fine for anything. Like, isn't it unlimited possibilities?
Commissioner Cruz, Mike Pepin, County Councilor. It won't take 60 days for us to review this. Commissioner Howell makes some very good points. This is just one extra tool in our toolbox. It's a tool that the state legislature has given us. We never have to use that tool, and we'll never get to use that tool unless 3 of you tell us we can use that tool. That doesn't mean that it's in a policy discussion, because you may have very conflicting opinions on whether we should have fines as high as $1,000, whether the state gives us that authority or not. But for the most part, it's just another tool in our toolbox. But we're happy to come back 30 days, 60 days, whenever, and explain to you how that tool could be used in the future, and what fines could possibly, what kind of offenses could possibly apply to the $1,000 fines, and then you could decide then whether you even want to go take the step of moving from $500 to $1,000, and we can do that. But for the most part, the action today, that if you took it, would never affect any fine, any offense, unless you as a body vote to make that enhanced, apply that enhanced penalty to that offense. So.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, shoulda, woulda, coulda. I feel like we're just talking about fine structures that could happen. If we're going to talk about the fine structure for stray bullets, then let's really just talk about that, because that's really what this is about. It's not about anything else but that. So I want to be clear that that's really how this started. We have a limited amount of time with ARPA funds that are out there. We have a ton of projects in the works that we need to have staff spending all their time looking at. It's important for us to spend time wisely. And I am the person that left the meeting Commissioner Howe was referencing, because I did have my questions answered. I didn't need to sit in there any longer. So I'm trying to manage my time with all of the projects that I'm working on, because we have significant problems. Just yesterday we were sent that we are going to have to talk about raises for our corrections staff, because we might have to shut down one of our facilities because we can't pay our people because they're going to other places. We have significant problems right in front of us. We don't need to spend and have staff spending time on things that could happen. We have to address the things that are right in front of us right now. And so that's why I'm more than supportive of deferring both of these items. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you. I was briefed yesterday slightly on this, but it was such a quick briefing that I still don't feel like I really have the best understanding and grasp of the situation. I do know, well, something that came from our discussion yesterday was that this was brought up before, when we talked about raising fines from $500 to $1,000 on businesses that didn't comply with our COVID mandates, and there was not the will of the majority of the board at that time to raise fines to $1,000 for that. So I don't know what's changed that would make commissioners now be wanting to do that, besides this one issue. So I'm not comfortable raising fines, and in our discussion yesterday, it was brought up that really we don't give out that many $500 fines anyway. So if we're not even utilizing that very often, then why are we going to double that? For most average people, a $500 fine is a pretty significant amount of money. They're going to learn a lesson now if it comes down to when we get briefed on this a little bit more, and we are seeing that $500 fine is being used repeatedly, and the same people are having those. Okay, we can look into that a little bit more, but I think the only reason we're having this conversation is because of item G, and we just passed a resolution on that like 3 weeks ago, so I don't see why we're having to have a full-on policy discussion to change something this significant this quickly. So I'm comfortable waiting like we've been discussing, but
Okay.
That's where I'm at. Thank you.
And I'll remind the commission and the public that we had an amended motion that would just a motion and a second to delay item F 60 days. That's on the table, but Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify a couple things. Draft agenda came out 9 days ago on November 22nd that included this item. The released agenda, public agenda, was released on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That was 7 days ago on 24th of November. We've had our opportunities to have our questions answered. Again, I'm not going to support $1,000 fines for COVID violations. I didn't support the COVID violations in the first place. And just because we even wanted to talk about that, it didn't have to be a level. They did not have to be the maximum fine possible under that table. That was a policy choice the commissioners made at that time. We would have the option to make it any particular level of fine based on how important we feel like this is. Once again, this is not item G on the agenda. We keep talking about item G. Again, I talked about item G and the $1,000 fine a week before, 6 weeks ago. So it's probably been close to 7 weeks now since I've been talking about this $1,000 fine. Again, this is not item G. This is just simply changing the table. We can talk about what items should have a higher fine, if any. And if you wanted to approve this table today and not approve item G, that's totally your choice. But I don't see why we would delay item F of changing the table, since the state law gives us that opportunity to do so. With regards to why is this on the agenda today, Mr. Papoon, you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but can any commissioner add an item to the agenda?
Yes, Commissioner Howell, pursuant to our agenda policy, it says any commissioner can ask for an item to be put on the Board of County Commission agenda.
So it's on the agenda because I've asked for it. I've been talking about it. Staff's been knowledgeable about it. We've had chances to be briefed on this. This was not something I pulled out of my pocket at the last minute and stuck on the agenda. And I'm following the right process. We have what's called Kansas Open Meetings Act. I don't talk to my colleagues a lot about issues because I do that in public open meetings, primarily. I've been talking about this in public open meetings. So I'm following the right processes. I'm doing the right things and doing it the right way, and I have the authority to put this on the agenda according to our policy. What reason will we delay this? I'll tell you why. It's politics. That's all. This makes no sense to delay this. If we push this off, it's simply because it came out of Commissioner Howell's mouth, I think. That's why we're pushing this off. It doesn't make sense to push it off. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Well, there's a motion and a second, Commissioner Howell, you may be exactly right with the state authorization for 1,000 and all of that's been said. I think four of us would just like to understand this better, and that's why we've asked for a 60-day delay on this item, and I think we'll all understand it better. You made a good point. You can put any item on there, and that item is on there, and maybe there's a process breakdown that we didn't all understand fully the impact of raising it from 500 to 1,000. My first thought was it almost sounds like the government is being a little more aggressive in fining, which I'm not sure I'm a big proponent of that. But all that said, there is a motion and a second to delay item F for 60 days. Any other comment? I don't see any. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
No.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, next item.
Item G, a resolution modifying the violation classification for discharge of firearms across property boundaries.
Kirk, you're back up. But this was to add.
And,
Go ahead.
Commissioners, based on your deferral of item F, item G cannot be passed at this time. So,
Okay.
So I guess,
I originally thought 6 months of data on that item, on that environment would be adequate to, and my previous comments are the same, is that Sheriff Easter confirmed that he's not dispatched anyone, and the thing is going good. So we could actually combine, since item G would be one of the items in the review of item F. So I'm okay with, is it all right to make a motion to delay item G 60 days also, so we'd have more data and we could have this reviewed at that time?
Certainly can, Mr. Chairman, if 60 days of data review you think is sufficient in this matter.
Yeah, that'd give us 90 days of any 911 or sheriff dispatch. I'm comfortable with making that motion for deferring item G for 60 days. Commissioner Cruz?
As a matter of procedure, what happens in this case if one item supersedes the next item? I mean, we're not even able to vote on this. Are we able to vote on this? We're not, right? So
Well,
what's the,
You couldn't pass item G as it stands right now, Commissioner Cruz. But item G, I think, could be amended to table this for 60 days, and you could adopt that.
okay, I'll second that motion that Chairman made. I was just checking
Okay.
out the procedure
Yeah,
of it.
absolutely. Yep. Commissioner Lopez?
I just had a quick question. Commissioner Howell mentioned that in Johnson County, they have this set at the higher class level. Because 90 days isn't really a whole lot of time, can we see what's going on in Johnson County as well and kind of get that information so we can just have an understanding since they've been doing this longer than we have? Thank you.
Sure. Good point. Commissioner Howell?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for a chance to speak. Does it make sense for us to push off item G for 60 days, not knowing what we're going to do with item F? F's not resolved. We've got 60 days to work out the issues of the fine table. Why would we push G off to 60 days? It seems like it should be included. If it's anything else that would be included in the schedule changes, it would be included in that, potentially at that time. Item G by itself doesn't make a lot of sense at this point. I guess I don't see the value of this motion. It doesn't do anything. And Mr. Chairman, I don't think it makes any sense. I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I could consider deferring item G to a later date and not put a date on there.
That
So-
might make more sense.
All right,
Chairman.
I'll change my motion to defer item G until a future date. And that motion in a second. Commissioner Dennis.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because one of the concerns I had on item G going into today was that it's only 30 days since we passed the last resolution that dealt with this. We've talked to the sheriff. There's been no problems in the last 30 days. I was honestly not in favor of item G to begin with as we came into the meeting today, just because I can't understand why, when there's no problem, why we're suddenly increasing a fine. And again, a fine is a tax on people, and I'm against taxing folks unnecessarily. So I think a longer than 60 days deferral on item G is definitely appropriate, because I just don't know that there's a problem. I don't know that the $500 fine is not adequate. That just kind of baffled me when this suddenly showed up on the schedule. And I agree with Commissioner Howell that people did talk about a $1,000 fine, and we understood at that point in time that 500 was the maximum. But I am not convinced that we even need a $1,000 fine for anything at this point in time. So I will vote in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a minor disagreement. I would say that fees are taxes that cover the cost of government. In other words, a fee is designed to cover the cost of whatever government service you're receiving. That's what a fee is. A fine is more of a punitive thing because of some action or activity. A fine is not a tax. A fine is a punishment. This is talking about shooting guns across property lines. Again, I'm following through with what I said I would do 7 weeks ago. We had meetings with members of the community. One of the commissioners voted no on that resolution because she said it wasn't enough. She wanted to have more money, a higher penalty, if you will, for shooting a bullet across property lines. The neighborhood that I met with, they were largely upset with the proposal because they didn't think $500 was going to be enough. And sure, again, I think it has done its job. I suspected it would do its job. Again, if someone doesn't shoot a bullet across a property line, it doesn't matter if it's $1 million fine, because they're not going to get penalized. They're not going to get penalized because they're not doing the bad thing that we're trying to get straightened up. So, thankfully, we have the response we needed so far. They are building houses even closer now to the area where the shooting is going on. I hope that this continues to be very positively worked out between these neighbors, and I think it has been very good since November the 2nd when we passed this, or November the 3rd, I guess it was, since we passed the previous resolution. But again, if someone's not doing this bad thing, it doesn't matter what the fine is. It only matters if you violate it. And so once again, the only criticism I received on this from anybody on this was the fine was only $500. It's only $500. It's only $500. I heard that over and over and over again. And I said during that entire time, it's only $500 right now. We're going to change it to $1,000 to match Johnson County as far as I was concerned. So again, as far as I'm concerned right now, I don't care if this ever comes up again at this point. Lord willing, no one will ever get hurt. No property will ever get damaged. I think the other commissioners need to own this. I've done my job. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to indefinitely defer this item G. Any other comments? I don't see any. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez? Aye. Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
No.
Commissioner Cruz? Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Okay, motion is deferred. Next item, please.
Item H, adoption of the 2022 Sedgwick County Legislative Platform.
Hakeem.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Hakeem Ashford, Communications Director again. I am here to kind of walk through our discussion of legislative platform. I'm not going to go through each item unless it's the will of the Commission. However, I wanted to highlight the changes on the document that you have before you that we discussed yesterday. The first being we struck the line under number 1 of the 221 mental health beds needed statewide. That line now reads, Sedgwick County requests a state facility with a bed capacity of 50. Next, Commissioner, there was an ask for more language under the support workforce initiatives to increase medical and clinical resources on your document there. Towards the bottom, it says, it now reads, support community crisis center funding of $9.5 million in statewide additional funds, with Sedgwick County ComCare requesting $1.5 million based on service volume and length of operation. So that line there is new, Commissioner.
Okay. Hold on, Hakeem.
Yes, sir.
No, I wanted to speak when he was finished.
Okay, all right.
Excuse me, sir.
That's all right, go ahead.
That was actually under strengthen and enhance the Medicaid safety net. So the point I just read, that was that's now the third bullet on that list. Moving on to support workforce initiatives to increase medical and clinical resources. That line now reads, it's on the second page of your document, now reads, address workforce shortages with the state's $1.6 billion in ARPA funding, which could include loan reimbursement, loan forgiveness, and tuition assistance. The next item that we changed, Commissioners, under DDDO, you will see the last bullet that reads include $5 million in the next budget cycle to specifically address IDD waiver waiting list. That has now been moved to the second line on the document that you have there, Commissioners. Expiration place, it was asked that goes to the last bullet on the platform, which it has been moved on your document there. Under specialty courts, Commissioners, there was an ask for a fiscal note there. The language remains the same. However, we did add language that now says additional funding of $1.54 million for community corrections and ComCare to support court participants. And I do have a breakdown in a separate document. If you would like to see that breakdown, Commissioners, we can definitely hand that out to you. Under Senate Bill 367 on the old document, that read a legislative review of judicial options concerning Senate Bill 367. The ask was just to make it say, make enhancements to Senate Bill 367. That's all the changes that we have, Commissioners.
Okay. Thank you for those changes. I think it's consistent with what we went in depth yesterday on, but a couple of questions. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Yesterday, I met with Chief Judge, and he had mentioned that when it comes to specialty courts, looking for support for additional judges, we need additional judges to be able to handle those specialty courts. So all we have here is just expanding 18th Judicial District Court in support of veteran and mental health courts. And so I wonder if there would be some sort of language that we could discuss the support of additional judges, having those words mentioned, because we can't host those courts if we don't have anybody to administer the courts itself. So that would be my only addition to this.
And Commissioner Cruz, if I can add into there, that was the ask, and talking to Joni and then Courtney, who are also on our Zoom call this morning as well. They are suggesting, I don't know how to get rid of this toolbar. Okay, hold on here. They do have an ask for additional judges. And Commissioner, to your point, on that second document, and the Excel kind of breakdown there, it lists those asks of new judges. So it is there.
Yeah, it's part of this.
It's part of the second form there, Commissioner, that we just handed out to you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. And like I said, Joni and Courtney are on the Zoom if you have questions.
So that's kind of fiscal notes.
That's in addition to,
Right.
correct, Chairman,
Perfect.
yeah, so.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Good question, and thank you for clarifying. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks to the staff and everyone that's been working on this legislative agenda so long. I appreciate it very much. On the first item on the regional mental health facility, I like what we've done with it, but again, where it says Sedgwick County requests a state facility with a bed capacity of 50, I would put, again, the word regional in front of state facility so that they understand that this is not the only one. This is just one region in the state. So I'd like that changed if
Absolutely,
everyone agrees to it.
You bet.
The other thing is...
That's a good point. That is a good point. In our region or what?
Yeah, I don't want us to be the only one.
Right. Okay. I concur.
And we've got Councilman Fry in the audience today, and I would imagine he's interested in the driver's license. Is that why that you're here today?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you had any questions on anything on our legislative agenda to be able to address this, because we have to work together. I know that we've got a combined statement of about 5 items that's combined from Wichita, the Chamber, and Sedgwick County, but I didn't know if there was anything on ours that might pertain to you. Okay? Just wanted to give you that opportunity. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's a good point, and yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I do agree. We did review, Councilmember Fry, that joint letter that I know we were maybe a little early in that, but anticipating that there wasn't much change that was going to come in front of GWP and you all, and might have already been there. So thanks for pointing that out, Commissioner Dennis. Is there any other adjustments we want to make? Okay, we are at the finish line of our legislative agenda. Do we have I'll make a motion that we approve it.
Okay.
There's a motion and a second. Any other comments? Other than I just want to thank the staff and thanks each commissioner. It seems like we all brought our passion on and our intelligence on each of these items and shared. And so I'm really pleased with what we've got.
Chairman, should we add language under, to Commissioner Cruz's point, under specialty courts for the judges? Do we want to add specific language in there speaking to the judges, or leave it as is, sir?
Well, if we're submitting...
I think we should support adding 2 additional judges.
Okay, the motion to approve this with adding 2 additional judges, and on what Commissioner Dennis had said related to a regional, our regional hospital, that word.
Chairman, if I can ask a question of Joni or Courtney, who's on Zoom, can you guys help me here? It's 2 additional judges and then 1 magistrate judge, is that correct?
That's ideal.
Hi, this is Joni. Yes, that is the request from Judge Beering, is to have an additional 2 district court judges and 1 magistrate judge.
So we will add that language into the legislative agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, along with the regional word. Okay, that's the motion and a second, I think. So any other comments, questions? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez? Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. And thank you again, commissioners and staff, on working on this. Okay, next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Tom Stolz, County Manager's Office. Recommend approval of consent items I through S this morning, with the exception of item N, which is going to need some further work.
Okay. Any questions on any of the consent items? And you wanted, so the motion, I'll make a motion that consent items I through S without item N. Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item, please.
Legislative issues.
We just had that. Sorry. Okay, next item.
Committee reports.
Committee reports. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I had the opportunity yesterday to attend the Zoo Board meeting. Just to kind of give you a little heads up. How many people do you think have toured Wild Lights up to this point?
Thousands.
950.
Well, we estimated, I think, about 35,000. We're over 100,000 now have attended Wild Lights. So it's been a tremendous success. Next year it will be back again in a different form, so it won't be the same show as it's going through. So we're very happy with that. The other good news with the zoo is during COVID, when we passed the budget for 2021, we figured that with COVID, we would not have a very large attendance during 2021. But we're now over 600,000 have toured the zoo. And what's amazing is when you look at the MSA that is just here in this region, we are about 98% of the MSA are attending the zoo, which is just about higher than any other zoo in the nation. So we can be very proud of what the leadership of the zoo is doing over there. I'm very excited with what we're looking at. As we look towards the future, we're going to have Stingray Cove coming in next year, so that I know I was down in Oklahoma City, and you can go in, you can pet a stingray as it swims by. And that's kind of a neat event that'll be happening. And in addition, we'll have the train coming in next year. Hopefully, along about May or something like that, we'll be able to have a ribbon cutting for the new train. And thanks for the Buford family for sponsoring that. So that's what's happening at the zoo. The other thing that I want to highlight, and the other commissioners may want to talk about it too, I don't know, but four of us just came from breakfast this morning, which is always one of the highlights, is to hear the kids talk about their experiences in JROTC, teaching them to be better citizens, teaching them to be better leaders. So we were able to attend the superintendent's breakfast just a few minutes ago. And it's just one of the reasons I decided to teach school after I retired from the military is because I wanted to make a difference in kids' lives. And JROTC is doing that exact same thing, it's making a difference in the kids' lives each and every day. And they're better citizens as a result of it. So Colonel Hester has, my hat's off to Colonel Hester. He has always been one of my heroes. And all of the leadership that puts that on. We've had the leadership corps here in our chambers just about a month ago, and they are absolutely fantastic leaders. I don't know how many of you have ever had a chance to meet Nicole, for example. She is the vice commander of the corps, but she's really spent most of her schooling in Israel. And now is here in the United States, and I think that she'll probably go back to Israel. Another neat story that was told today by Colonel Hester is that at North High School when they first started the JROTC program there. They had a young gentleman that went through the entire JROTC program and then went to college and went through ROTC, and he's coming back to Kansas specifically because he is going to be pinned full colonel here in the near future, and he wants to be pinned at North High School. And so I asked Colonel Hester if he'd invite all of us over to that. But that's the first person that we know for a fact went all the way to colonel. Those of you that were able to attend the indoor parade that we had over at Century 2 recently heard a young first lieutenant that graduated from East High School who is now an officer in the United States Air Force. So it's just, and I'm not saying that JROTC is designed to recruit folks into the military. That's not the purpose of it, but we do get to see some of those folks as they come back that did decide to become members of the military and support our nation. So those are the important things that I've done recently. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good report. Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Last night, a group of downtown business owners met at GWP for a discussion about mental health. The Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition gave a presentation to downtown business owners, Brooke with Public, Timmery with Doodah Diner, a number of other downtown business owners were given a presentation about the state of the coalition's work, what we are trying to accomplish with the unhoused population that need support on our streets of downtown. It was a pretty robust conversation. I appreciate Brian Fry, Councilmember Brian Fry, and Becky Tuttle, and Chairman Meitzner were there for a little bit. At the end, we had a pretty good discussion to hear from those downtown business owners exactly what they expect in regards to helping those who are experiencing severe and persistent mental illness, addiction. It's a real challenge, and it seems to be getting worse. And so I just wanted to really thank Brenda Dietzman, Misty Bruckner, for taking the time out of their day to share and listen to community members, also to the GWP staff, Jason Gregory and all of his staff for setting up the meeting. This is an important, tough, uncomfortable conversation to have. And the last thing we want is for anyone to not feel included in the discussion. And so I hope that folks understand that we want to hear from you. These are big topics that haven't been tackled for a while, and we see the ramifications of not handling and not supporting individuals. We see how it's manifesting on our streets. And so that's really all I wanted to mention under committee reports. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And I think you witnessed firsthand again, not that you needed to, but the downtown economy and the business of the downtown is very concerned about this. And as much as they have their own, I don't call it complaints or issues, they really want to be helpful to help solve this. So it's really good. I'm glad that you were able to attend that. I mean, thanks, Commissioner or Councilmember Fry, for being there also. Okay, any other reports? Okay, I don't see any. So next item, please.
Other.
Does anybody have anything other? Commissioner Cruz.
Yeah, just real quickly, thank you for the opportunity. Recently, I attended over a weekend an addiction conference. I sent a follow-up to all commissioners, to a lot of our staff as well, on November the 23rd, kind of outlining all of I attended 16 different sessions over 3 days. It was jam-packed. To say that my brain was a little tired afterwards is an understatement. But there were some pretty interesting things that I discovered. And Drug and alcohol use in the United States costs $1.45 trillion in economic loss and societal harm annually. So this includes $578 billion in economic loss. So when we talk about downtown development here locally, what are we losing in regards to lost productivity, absence at work? There are so many things that affect addiction, or that addiction affects, and it has no boundaries. So I will be uploading all of the PowerPoints that I collected for anybody who wants to see those. This was a very intense conference that I'm grateful that I was able to attend. And one last fine little tidbit, a shocking 97.5% of people who suffer from addiction don't seek help because they don't think they need it. Other factors are because of the stigma. And so reducing the stigma around our community, understanding that we have some people that are really suffering. A young woman I met 2 weeks ago just died this past Saturday. Beautiful 30-year-old woman who had a long life to live. And, this holiday season, I just encourage everyone to reach out to those who you may have lost connection with, because especially over the holiday season, things are really tough and people do things be out of desperation and depression. So thank you for this time to share that with you. And if you have any questions around my recent conference trip on addiction, I'd be happy to address you and answer any questions you may have. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that report and for posting that information. Anybody else have anything under other? Okay, I don't see any. So next item,
Executive session.
Commissioner Cruz.
I move that the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session for 30 minutes until 11:52 and for consultation with an attorney for the county regarding matters deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship in order to discuss pending litigation and legal advice on county matters, and that the Board of County Commissioners returns to this room from executive session at 11:52.
Okay, second. Any other questions? Being none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Cruz.
Aye.
Chairman Meitzner.
Aye. Okay, we will go to the boardroom. So anybody here can stay. We will vacate to the boardroom. Okay, thank you. We have returned from executive session, and no action was taken, no formal action proposed. So anybody else, the commissioners have anything else to come before the commission? I don't see any, so thank you for watching, everybody. We will stand adjourned.